Hello everyone, and welcome back to Series Flicks. In our last quiet, reflective episode of Season 3, the glittering world of the Gilded Age was shaken to its very foundations. We watched as Bertha Russell finally achieved the pinnacle of her social climbing ambitions. The wedding of Gladys Russell to the Duke of Buckingham was the event of the century, a spectacle of wealth and aristocracy that silenced every critic in New York. But as the organ music faded and the guests departed, the silence left behind was deafening. George Russell, the titan of industry who had stood by his wife through every snub and scandal, finally drew a line in the sand. He refused to return to the home where he felt his daughter had been sold for a title. If you're enjoying this journey into 19th century New York, please hit that like button and subscribe to Series Flicks so you never miss a chapter. Today's episode picks up in the chilling aftermath of that shattered alliance. The summer season in Newport is ending. The grand palaces by the sea are being shuttered against the coming winter. But for Bertha Russell, the cold has already set in. She is a woman who has everything she ever wanted, yet she has never been more alone. The Atlantic Ocean was a churning mass of slate gray, crashing violently against the cliffs of Newport. Inside the Russells' marble palace, the sound of the waves was muffled by heavy velvet drapes, but the chill seemed to seep through the stone walls regardless. The grand ballroom, usually a kaleidoscope of light and movement, sat in a state of suspended animation. It was a room designed for hundreds, for music, for the swirl of silk, and the glitter of diamonds, but now it was a cavern of echoes. Servants moved silently around the periphery, draping white dust sheets over the gilded furniture. To Bertha, watching from the mezzanine, they looked like ghosts or perhaps shrouds covering the corpse of her marriage. She tightened her grip on her fan. Though the room was far from warm, George had been gone for 4 days. He had not made a scene. He had not shouted. He had simply instructed his valet to pack his trunks for the city and had left without a backward glance at the woman standing on the portico. The silence he left behind was heavier than any argument. It was a void that swallowed the air in the room, making it hard to breathe. Bertha walked through the house, her heels clicking sharply on the marble, a lonely rhythm that emphasized her solitude. She paused at the door of the morning room, steeling herself before entering. Gladys stood by the window, a solitary figure framed against the turbulent sea. The new Duchess looked impossibly young in her traveling suit of dove gray. The heavy engagement ring, a family heirloom of the Duke's, looked like a shackle on her slender finger. She didn't turn when her mother entered. She just kept staring at the gray horizon as if searching for a ship that would take her anywhere but England. Bertha observed the slump of her daughter's shoulders, the defeat radiating from her posture. It was an imperfection, a crack in the porcelain doll image Bertha had cultivated so carefully, and instinctively she wanted to fix it. "Gladys, darling, you must not cry. You are leaving for a life most women only dream of. You are a duchess. Tears do not become you." Gladys finally turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed, the evidence of tears she had tried to hide but failed to suppress. The look she gave her mother was devoid of the usual teenage rebellion. Instead, it was filled with a profound adult sadness that unsettled Bertha more than any tantrum could have. "Is that all that matters to you, Mother? How it looks? Father isn't here. He isn't coming to say goodbye, is he?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Bertha stiffened, her spine locking into the rigid posture that had carried her through 1,000 social slights. She could not let Gladys see the fear that gnawed at her own heart. She had to be the general even if her army had deserted her. "Your father is a man of strong emotions. He needs time to understand the magnitude of what we have achieved. He is burying himself in his work. It is what men do. He hates this. He hates what you did. And I think he hates me for going along with it." The pain in Gladys's voice was raw, a physical wound exposed to the salt air. Bertha moved to comfort her, but stopped short. The distance between them felt unbridgeable, widened by titles and betrayals. "Nonsense. He loves you. But he does not understand the world as we do. He thinks happiness is found in simple things. He does not see that safety, true safety, comes from position." Gladys stepped closer to her mother. For the first time in weeks, the defiance was gone, replaced by a terrified vulnerability. She looked like a little girl again, the one who used to run to Bertha when thunder shook the house. She reached out and took Bertha's hand, her fingers trembling against the stiff kid leather of her mother's glove. "Mother, there is something else. Something I haven't told the Duke. Something I haven't told anyone." Bertha looked down at her daughter. She saw the pallor of her skin, the way her hand instinctively went to her stomach, a protective, fearful gesture. The realization hit Bertha with the force of a physical blow. It was unexpected, sudden, and yet, in the strange calculus of Bertha's mind, it instantly transformed from a shock into an opportunity. "Gladys? Are you?" "I am. I saw the physician in the village before the wedding." He confirmed it. A smile tugged at the corners of Bertha's mouth, a reflex of pure ambition she couldn't control. A child. A ducal heir. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the cement that would hold the shaky edifice of this alliance together. "But this is marvelous. A child. An heir. The Duke will be overjoyed. This cements your position in the family immediately." "No, Mother, listen to me. I am terrified. The Duke, he is not a patient man. If I am ill on the voyage, if anything happens, and Father, if Father knows, he will storm the ship. He will try to annul the marriage or keep me here. He thinks I am a child being sent to slaughter. If he knows I am carrying a baby, he will never let me leave." Bertha's mind raced, the gears turning faster than the carriage wheels that would soon take Gladys away. A grandchild. George's grandchild. It was the ultimate trump card. George Russell was a hard man, a ruthless businessman who could crush unions and bankrupt competitors without blinking, but his weakness, his fatal flaw, had always been his family. A baby changed everything. It made the abstract concrete. It made the future real. "Promise me, Mother. Promise me you won't use this. Let me go to England. Let me tell the Duke in my own time. Do not use my child as a weapon in your war with Father." Bertha looked into her daughter's pleading eyes. She saw the terror there, the desperate need for a mother's protection, not a strategist's plot. For a moment her heart broke for the frightened girl standing before her, but then she thought of the empty chair at the dining table. She thought of the silence in the house, the cold bed, the humiliation of entering society alone. The promise died in her throat before it was ever truly formed. "I promise, Gladys, your secret is safe with me." It was a lie, delivered with the smooth perfection of a seasoned diplomat. As she hugged her daughter goodbye, watching the carriage disappear down the long gravel drive into the mist, Bertha knew exactly how she was going to spend that secret. It was the price of admission back into her husband's life. Meanwhile, in the heart of Manhattan, the city was alive with the grinding noise of commerce. The air smelled of coal smoke and horse manure, a stark contrast to the crisp salt air of Newport. The streets were a chaotic symphony of shouts, clattering hooves, and the hiss of steam, a world that George Russell usually commanded with ease. But today, the noise seemed to grate on his nerves, a constant reminder of the chaos in his own life. In his private office at the new headquarters of the Russell Consolidated Trust, George Russell sat behind a desk the size of a small boat. The room was dark, paneled in heavy mahogany, lit only by the hissing gas lamps that cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. Piles of ledgers and blueprints for the new Pennsylvania rail line were scattered across the surface, a fortress of paper he had built to keep his thoughts at bay. George looked haggard. He hadn't shaved as closely as usual, leaving a shadow of stubble on his jaw. His eyes were dark circles of exhaustion. He had been sleeping on the leather Chesterfield in the corner of the office for 3 nights, refusing to go to the new house on 61st Street, and unable to stomach the social pageantry of his club, where every glance felt like an interrogation about his wife's whereabouts. Larry Russell stood by the window, watching the traffic on the avenue below. He turned to face his father, his expression filled with a deep, abiding concern. He had never seen his father like this, defeated not by a business rival, but by his own heart. "You cannot live in here, Father. The staff is whispering. The board is whispering."
"Let them whisper. As long as the stock holds, I don't care what they say."
"Mother is returning from Newport today. The house will be open."
"That house is not a home, Larry. It is a stage set. And I am tired of playing my part in her production."
"She is your wife."
"She sold your sister."
The words were flat, devoid of anger, which made them all the more terrifying. It wasn't a burst of rage. It was a statement of fact, cold and immutable as iron. George picked up a pen and aggressively signed a document, the scratching sound loud in the quiet room, a small act of violence against the paper.
Told her there was a line. I told her that Gladys's happiness was the one thing that was not for sale. She looked me in the eye and did it anyway. How do I go back to her, Larry? How do I sleep in that bed knowing she values a crest on a letterhead more than her own flesh and blood?
She thinks she did what was right. In her mind, she secured Gladys's future.
Then her mind is a place I no longer recognize.
Marion and we want you there for the engagement dinner. George looked up. His face softened as he looked at his son. Larry was the one bright spot in this mess. He had found a good woman of Van Ryn, ironically, but a woman with a heart, someone who valued people over position.
I will be there for you, Larry. Always. But do not ask me to pretend that everything is fine with your mother. That is a lie I can no longer afford.
Across the street, at the corner of 61st and 5th, the atmosphere in the Van Ryn house was undergoing a seismic shift. The morning light streamed into the dining room, illuminating the heavy, dark furniture that had stood there for decades. But the energy in the room had changed completely. Ada Forti sat at the head of the table. She wore a dress of rich burgundy silk, a color she never would have dared to wear in her spinster days. Her posture was relaxed, her smile gentle but firm. She poured the coffee with a steady hand, the china clinking softly, a sound that used to terrify her when Agnes was in a mood. Now she controlled the pot. Agnes Van Ryn sat to her right. She was dressed in severe black, her spine stiff enough to crack walnut shells. She stared at the plate of soft-boiled eggs in front of her with undisguised contempt. The egg cup seemed to mock her, a symbol of the new regime. I see we are abandoning standards entirely. Soft-boiled eggs? It is a sloppy food, Ada. It requires dipping. It is undignified. I find them comforting, Agnes, and since Cook asked me for the menu this week, I thought we might try something different. Since you pay the cook, you mean? You might as well say it. I would never be so crass. But yes, since the finances are now simplified, I think we can allow ourselves a few small changes. Marion entered the room, looking flustered but radiant. The cold wind had flushed her cheeks, and she carried the energy of the outside world into the stifling room. She kissed Ada on the cheek and gave a wary nod to Agnes, navigating the minefield of the breakfast table with practiced ease.
Good morning, Aunt Ada. Aunt Agnes. I'm sorry I'm late. I was meeting Larry in the park.
Of course you were. Consorting with the enemy before noon. It is a wonder you don't simply move across the street and sleep in their scullery.
Larry is not the enemy, Aunt Agnes, and neither is Mr. Russell.
How is Larry doing? And his father? Marion sighed, taking her seat and unfolding her napkin. Her happiness was tempered by the tragedy unfolding across the street. It felt selfish to be so in love when the Russells were falling apart.
Not well. Larry says Mr. Russell hasn't left his office in days. He looks terrible. He refuses to see Mrs. Russell when she arrives today.
Good. The man has finally developed a spine. Perhaps he realized that sleeping next to a viper is hazardous to one's health.
Aunt Agnes, please. It's tragic. They built that massive house together, and now it's just empty rooms.
We must be kind, Agnes. A broken marriage is a terrible thing. It is a predictable thing when one marries for ambition. I warned you, Marion. That house is cursed by new money greed. Bannister? The butler stepped forward, his face an impassive mask, though his eyes darted nervously between the two sisters. He was a man who knew which way the wind blew, and the gale was coming from Ada's chair now. Yes, Mrs. Forti? Please ensure that we send a basket of fruit to Mrs. Russell upon her arrival. A gesture of neighborly welcome. Agnes dropped her spoon. It clattered loudly against the china, a gunshot in the quiet room. Fruit? To that woman? Over my dead body. Luckily, Agnes, it is not your body that is signing the check for the fruitmonger. Ada took a sip of her tea, serene and untouchable. Agnes stared at her sister, realizing with a dawn of horror that the power had truly irrevocably shifted. She was a guest in her own kingdom, forced to eat soft-boiled eggs and tolerate charity toward the Russells. The train ride from Newport to New York was a blur of steam and rattling wheels. Bertha Russell sat in her private car, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She looked perfect. Not a hair was out of place, her hat was pinned at the precise angle of fashion, and her gloves were spotless. But inside she was screaming. She replayed the conversation with Gladys over and over. A baby. It was the key. It had to be. Bertha's mind worked like a master chess player, always 3 moves ahead. George was angry now. Yes. He was hurt, but George was a builder. He built legacies. He built futures. He could not turn his back on the next generation of Russells. She convinced herself, mile by mile, that breaking her promise to Gladys was an act of mercy. If she told George he would have to come home, he would have to protect his daughter and grandchild. It would force them to be a family again. It was for the greater good. By the time the train pulled into Grand Central Depot, Bertha had dried her invisible tears and formulated her plan. She would not go home to the empty mansion to wait like a dutiful wife. She would go straight to the lion's den. The sun had set by the time Bertha's carriage pulled up to the Russell Consolidated Trust building. It was a looming structure of stone and iron, a testament to George's power. She swept past the clerks in the outer office, ignoring their startled looks, the rustle of her silk skirts the only sound in the hushed workspace. She did not knock on the heavy mahogany door of his private sanctuary. She simply opened it. George was standing by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The firelight caught the amber liquid, casting a warm glow that did not reach his eyes. He looked up, and for a second, Bertha saw a flash of the man who used to look at her with adoration, the man who had laid the world at her feet. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a wall of ice.
I did not send for you, Bertha.
I am your wife, George. I do not need an appointment.
You forfeited the right to this intimacy when you sold our daughter.
George turned his back on her, staring into the dying embers of the fire. His shoulders were tense, his body language screaming rejection.
Go home, Bertha. Enjoy the palace you sacrificed everything for. Or we'll stay here.
You can't stay here forever. People are talking.
Let them talk. I don't care about society. I never did. That was your game. And you won. Congratulations. You are the mother of a duchess. You have won everything.
Not everything. Not you. She stepped closer, the scent of her perfume drifting toward him. It was a scent he used to love, one that used to signal comfort and home. Now it smelled like betrayal. George's knuckles whitened around his glass. George, please. I know you are angry. I know you think I am a monster, but I did it for her. And you need to know, there is something else.
I don't want to hear it. No more schemes. No more maneuvering.
It isn't a scheme, George. It's life. Gladys, before she left, she told me. George turned slowly, the tone of her voice caught him. It wasn't the imperious tone of the socialite. It was desperate, almost pleading.
Told you what?
Bertha took a breath. This was it. The gamble. The moment that would either save her marriage or incinerate the last remnants of it. She is with child, George. You are going to be a grandfather. Silence crashed into the room. George stared at her, his eyes wide. He processed the words, a child. Gladys was pregnant. His little girl was going to have a baby in a cold castle in England, thousands of miles away from anyone who loved her. The instinct to protect surged through him, fierce and immediate. But then he looked at his wife. He saw the calculation in her eyes. He saw the expectation. She had taken this precious, fragile news a secret that Gladys undoubtedly wanted kept quiet, and she had brought it here like a bargaining chip. She was trading the news of an unborn child for his forgiveness. The disgust that rose in his throat was bitter and choking.
Did she ask you to tell me?
Bertha hesitated. That split second of hesitation condemned her more than any confession could have. She was afraid, but she doesn't understand.
She asked you not to tell me. I know she did. Because she knows I would worry. She knows I would want to protect her.
I am protecting her. I am securing her family. George set his glass down on the mantelpiece with a heavy thud. He walked toward Bertha, stopping just inches from her. He did not touch her. The air between them crackled with the energy of things broken beyond repair.
You aren't protecting anyone, Bertha. You are using everyone. You used Gladys to get a title. Now you are using an unborn child to get your husband back.
George, that isn't fair.
It is the truth. Is there anything you won't sell? Is there any part of our lives you won't trade for your own comfort?
I love you. I want you home.
You don't want me. You want the picture of us. You want the power of us. But the man, the father, you haven't seen him in years.
He walked past her to the door and held it open. The gesture was final. It was an eviction from his heart.
Get out, Bertha.
George.
Get out, before I say something that can never be retracted.
Bertha stood there, trembling. Her gamble had failed. She had played her highest card, and it had not only failed to win the pot, it had cost her the seat at the table. She gathered her skirts, lifted her chin in a pathetic imitation of her usual pride, and walked out of the office. George slammed the door behind her. The sound echoed through the empty building like a gunshot. He leaned his forehead against the wood, closing his eyes as a single, harsh sob racked his chest. He was going to be a grandfather, and he had never felt more like an orphan. That concludes today's episode of The Gilded Age. In this shattering premiere of Season 4, we have witnessed the complete disintegration of the Russell marriage. Bertha thought that the news of a grandchild would be the glue to put her family back together, but instead it revealed the depth of her own ruthlessness to George. She has broken her daughter's trust to save herself, and in doing so, she has pushed George further away than ever before. Meanwhile, the Van Ryn household has settled into a new, uneasy reality where Ada calls the shots, leaving Agnes to stew in her own bitterness. But the question remains, what will happen when Gladys finds out her mother betrayed her secret? Will the Duke discover the truth before Gladys is ready to tell him? And can Marion and Larry truly build a life together when their families are in the midst of a civil war? Do you think George was right to kick Bertha out, or should he have put his anger aside for the sake of the baby? Join us next time to find out. If you enjoyed this dramatic episode, please like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments, whose side are you on? Team George or Team Bertha? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, this is Series Flicks.